Hi. So we have moved on from second language acquisition and language teaching methodology to teaching of these so-called skills. In this presentation, we are going to look at listening. And so why are we beginning with listening? Because first language acquisition happens with listening, and this principle can be extended to second language acquisition. So children learn through listening because they are not literate, so they cannot receive language input through reading. So they are totally dependent on listening, and they can't even speak, let alone write. So they cannot use any other skill to learn language. However, older children can learn through listening, but they need to learn to listen, which we are going to explore in this presentation later on. So a lot of early language learning happens with listening, and children learn and listen to language for meaning rather than analyzing the language, because they don't know a lot about the world which they are living in. So they try to figure out the meaning of things going around, and speaking emerges gradually after some time. You can imagine a 4-year-old and can imagine how little she knows about the world she is living in. So small children are barely literate in L1, and the literacy in L2 makes too many demands. So we need to focus only on listening and give a lot of comprehensible input to children so that they can acquire L2. Older children can approach language from spoken as well as written language because they are literate, so they can use other skills to learn a language. So that the time in which children cannot speak, they can only listen and understand, and they are trying to figure out the world which they live in. That period is called the silent period. In this period, TPR is very useful approach with young beginners because they cannot speak another language. So since TPR focuses a lot on nonverbal cues to help them understand, for example, use of gestures, intonation, and all sort of visual aids to make the meaning accessible to children. So teachers talk and comment on what's going on in the classroom so that students can pick up a lot of language through this. Children can be given tasks which require them to listen and understand at a later stage, so they can listen and do something rather than listen and speak. So such tasks could include, for example, a recording in which students are required to listen and point to the animals which are spoken about in the audio. Children will eventually speak when they have heard something frequently. So very important here is teacher input. So teacher talk, which is the main source of input for children. Teacher must support children in their quest for meaning because young children are really trying to understand the meaning of this world and things going around. So the question arises, do children take a top-down, meaning whole chunk and sentence approach, or bottom-up, meaning picking up individual words or focusing on individual words? Probably they are using both approaches. They look up for the meaning holistically, but they are also focusing on individual words. So for example, if I say a student who is entering in the class that take off your bag and put it on the floor, so a child is perhaps focusing on the holistic meaning of the whole discourse to comply and do what a teacher is asking you or asking him or her. but the child is also focusing on the individual words in this discourse which the child can understand. So for example, bag, take off, which could easily be accessible because the teacher must have used some body language to show it, and the floor, which the teacher is pointing to. So the children are using both the approaches, top down and bottom up, to focus on the meaning as well as the focus on individual words. The teacher's main job is to make meaning accessible for children. So the teacher should devise strategies to do so. The teacher must know that children blame themselves when they cannot understand because they are used to operating with only partial understanding of what they hear every day. They almost don't understand three-quarters of what's being talked about, yet they do not ask for clarification. So it is teacher's responsibility to check for understanding. At this stage, I'd like you to pause for thought and think about how a teacher can check for students' understanding. So while providing input in the classroom, teachers should provide conditions which are similar to L1. For example, children are really interested in listening to bedtime stories, so we can also use bedtime stories in our classroom. Teachers should also deliberately use strategies which parents use intuitively to draw children into using L2. At this stage, I'd like you to pause and think about what could be those strategies which can nudge children to use L2. Okay, a teacher should also create non-threatening environment which supports children's learning, and this environment includes making children comfortable, and it also includes the physical environment with proper desks, chairs, and perhaps the weather. Teachers should also expose children to comprehensible, meaningful language at discourse level. So one of the examples could be to comment on all the things which are going on in the classroom that could be that could help children to be exposed to language at discourse level. Teachers should also set up activities that include language play and purposeful language use, because young children are not really taking lessons as such and sitting and just receiving the lecture. They need a push to use the language purposefully and playfully. So at this stage, I'd like you to pause for a thought and suggest one activity which could include purposeful language use. While giving input, we need to maintain students' interest, and the children should feel motivated, so that topics must be chosen carefully. Children cannot understand what's going on in faraway world, so all the topics which we are selecting should be the here and now, which they can concretely see. The topics should include things from children's world, for example, toys, books, etc. It should relate to their personal experience, like staying at a grandmother's house, or their school, their birthday party. At this point, I'd like you to pause and think about what might early lessons include. So, for example, a group of children is coming to you in the classroom and they don't know a single word of English. How would you teach them? Suppose that your children are 5 to 7 years old. Devise a 5-minute activity which you'll do with them in the first 5 minutes of that class. I hope you now understand how difficult it is to entertain a group of children who can't understand English. Now let's move on to some children's characteristics so that we can make the most of them. Children have the ability for indirect learning, which means that they are not really focusing on what's the focus of the lesson. Rather, they are trying to make meaning of everything which is going around. So we should let them explore and give them multiple opportunities for indirect learning by giving them comprehensible input and let them choose what to pick up. They have lively imaginations. So for example, if they are interested in dragon and dinosaurs, so let their imaginations go wild and let them explore the language through their imagination. They are naturally creative in different communication situations, and they are very good at creatively using their language, whatever they have acquired. So we should let them use their language creatively. They are able to grasp the gist of the message, and they are not interested in exploring or analyzing parts and bits of the message. They are able to grasp the gist of the message even without the teacher explaining what it is. So we should make the most out of this characteristic. They love speaking, so of course we cannot impose them to be quiet. They would like to speak because this is their instinct. They enjoy fun and games, so we should include riddles, jokes, and different language games. Total physical response, which is quite popular with young children. Here we use commands and instructions and demonstrate to children what they mean. We should start with one word commands or maybe two word commands at a time. So for example, stand up, sit down, jump, and show and demonstrate their meaning by doing it. We can also include songs with actions, which are very popular with children. We can also use storytelling with puppets or pictures. Such stories and songs are varied and repetitive, especially the songs, because they use a set of words together and then in the next stanza they use different set of similar words. So it's very good for vocabulary acquisition. We can also give children yes and no cards because they cannot speak, so we can teach them how to use these cards for responding yes and no. After a while, we can also ask students to draw from simple instructions. So for example, we can give papers and color pencils and ask students to draw whatever we are saying. So now the children are entering the late primary school, and here they are developing the capacity for metacognitive awareness, and now they understand that they are actually learning a language which is different from other subjects. They still take pleasure from puns, riddles, and other linguistic play. Their emerging metacognition help them to think in a more sophisticated ways about how language works. They are more aware of the differences between languages and understand that not everyone speaks their first language or their second language. They have additional tool for further enhancing their communication skill, that is literacy. Now they are developing their literacy so they can expand their linguistic repertoire, particularly in late childhood and adolescence. So let's move on to the conclusions of listening in primary classes. So children are learning language through listening. The main input is the teacher. Teacher comments on whatever is happening in the classroom, and this paves way to the acquisition of a lot of common language. Listening can be classroom communication, stories and songs, or video clips. Literacy is still developing, so follow-up writing tasks can be used in the late primary school, but they must be carefully designed because we don't want our students to be burdened with such tasks. So now they are adolescents and they are about to be in their teenage, and they are leaving their young childhood behind. Now they are developing independent thought. They are forming strong opinions about themselves, about their learning, about their school, teachers, friends. They are also able to develop language learning strategies, because at this stage they can figure out that this is a language which they are learning and the nuts and bolts of language, so they can develop strategies for dealing with different aspects of language. They are also literate, so they have a different approach to information processing. Their motivation changes because of the exam they are supposed to sit. For example, their board exams in grade 9 in Pakistan, they have a lot of peer pressure, and teachers also need to teach them how to deal with that pressure. So all in all, they approach listening in a different way from young children. So in their teenage, they can use their cognitive maturity, and they are able to make effective use of explicit knowledge for foreign language learning and speed up the process. So this is high time where we can teach them meta language, like different tenses, different aspects of language, like sentence structure and other features, maybe explicit grammar, so that they can use it to develop further language. There is also a changing perception about teaching listening. The image of L2 listening instruction is changing, because at one time listening was assumed to be a passive activity receiving only little classroom attention. Now listening is recognized as an active process, which is essential to L2 acquisition and deserving a systematic development as a skill in its own right. Technology is also adding a new dimension, because technology changes how and when we listen. Factors to consider in teaching listening are metacognitive strategies, which includes attention management. How can we teach students to be attentive for a specific length of time and listen to a listening text and answer the questions? We can ask pre-questions, we can activate their schemata, which means that we can tap on their background knowledge so that they can understand the upcoming knowledge well. We can use top-down and bottom-up approaches. By this we can focus on the holistic meaning as well as the specific vocabulary, and developing meaning through words approach. We can also develop their working memory, which is the memory in our brain that retains the new information for some seconds before it either goes into the long-term memory or is discarded from the brain. So we can extend their capacity of working memory, so that they can retain new information through listening for more time in their working memory. We can include relevant topics which are related to their lives and their interests, and we can include technology use, because technology, they are naturally happy with technology, and it is called that they are technological natives because they have grown up with technology. So this is a framework which is provided by a researcher. This is a framework for listening instruction, their stages, and related metacognitive strategies. So stage 1 is planning and predicting stage, where the students are going to speculate and predict the types of information and possible words which they are going to hear. So at this stage they are planning and directing their attention. So after prediction, they have listened to the text, and now the second stage is The first verification stage. Here students will verify initial hypotheses, correct them as required, and note additional information which they have understood by listening. Then this is not an individual process. They are going to compare what they have written with their peers. They will modify it as required. They will establish what needs resolution and decide on details that still need special attention. So at this stage, they are monitoring and planning, and they are preparing them for selective attention. At the second verification stage, they are going to verify the points of disagreement. They'll make corrections and write down additional details which they have understood this time. So they are monitoring and problem solving. Next, they are going to discuss it with the class, in which everyone is going to contribute to reconstruct the text's main points and details. And now they are going to reflect on how students arrived at the meaning of certain words or parts of the text. So they are monitoring and evaluating. So final verification stage includes a student to listen for the information they could not decipher earlier in the classroom discussion, and they were told by the teacher that this information was included in the text, but they could not understand it. So at this stage, they are going to listen for that information. So this is selective attention and monitoring. Last stage is the reflection stage. So based on discussions of strategies used to compensate for what was not understood, students write goals for next listening activity. So this is how they are evaluating their own listening and preparing for future listenings. So let's talk about listening and IT. Technology has changed how and where listening takes place, because teenagers are living with social networks, YouTube, and the internet. Nowadays, we are so fortunate that English is everywhere, and students already receive a lot of input through using the internet or social networks. IT has also transformed language teaching in the classrooms and has opened up numerous opportunities for flipped lessons, because now we can ask students to listen to a particular text at home, and the necessary discussion and their activities can be conducted in the classroom. What are the characteristics of the listening material we have available now? We have a lot of short clips available on the internet, a lot of authentic material which we can download from YouTube or any other sites on the internet. By authentic material, I mean that the material which is not specifically designed for English language learners. It includes a lot of different accents, so students could be made familiar with many of them, because English is not restricted to English speaking countries anymore. It has become the lingua franca, or the international language. So the student should be able to understand different accents. So the listening material is often accompanied by visuals, which can be really attractive for teenagers or children. The transcript is also often available, so older children who are literate, they can make the most of it. And listening can also be interactive if we are tech savvy and technology is available in the classroom. So now I'd like you to think what might be the implications of these characteristics in teaching listening. Moving on to the conclusions, young children learn language through listening and they move on to speaking then. However, older children develop literacy and can approach listening in a different way, because they can read and they can approach their language learning through reading as well as other skills like speaking and writing. Teenagers need to learn how to listen to gain a deeper understanding. So they are listening to a text. Now they have to understand the meaning, what are the hidden meaning behind a particular sentence or discourse. So exam focused classes have also changed the purpose of listening in the classroom, because if students are required to sit an exam, we need to prepare them accordingly. IT has also changed what teenagers listen to. Now they are technological natives. They've grown up with technology. They are watching a lot of things on the YouTube or social networks. So the teachers should also exploit technology. Moving on to the task for this topic, you are required to complete the reading and answer the questions in the task sheet. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I'll see you in the next presentation with the next skill, that is speaking. Bye for now.